so excited to be joined today for the next in our Well series, Women Who Are Empowering, Leading, and Leveraging in the Real Estate and Similar Spaces. Michelle is joining us today, and I've had the pleasure of working with Michelle at Berman Media, and we're going to hear a little bit about that group, but more importantly, getting to know Michelle and the success that she's been able to achieve since, gosh, we first met in person. What was it? I think around July of 2022. So it's been just over a year. We had the opportunity to reconnect in person. It seems like we're just going to do that every year, right? About once a year in July, if nothing else. And
Yeah, at minimum.
at minimum, I'd love more than that. But you have had some pretty amazing growth in that last year. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that, first of all, and then really dive a little bit into social media, because the social media space is getting crowded and noisy. And I think you're doing some things that are different and really require some time and conversation to understand what it is that's different and why it's important. So take it away. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing over the last year.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. This is such a special treat to get to spend time with you to talk about us as women, and I think that there needs to be more of that. So it's awesome to get to do this with you. But as far as we're concerned, we've grown since July of 2022. We've gone from 4 employees to 13 as of today, just over a year later. And there's so much that goes into that and how that works. And really why I made the decision to invest in building my crew, if you will. But how did it happen? I think ultimately it comes down to making a decision of what kind of leader I wanted to be, and also what kind of mom and wife I wanted to be, and trying to find a balance between those two things. As you got to meet my little guy last year, but being a mom is the most important thing in the world to me. And we were growing so fast that I felt like I was falling away from the kind of role as a mother that I really wanted. And so I made a very important decision, I feel like, in investing and growing my organization to support that goal, where my company could continue to grow and we could make more money, but I could also spend more time with my family without sacrificing my income, right?
Yeah, it's incredible.
So
You've definitely done an amazing job, like watching the transformation in you as an individual in just over a year, where you were sort of like, you could tell you were at this sort of stress breaking point a year ago, where most people, I think, would have sort of shut down and maybe just sort of existed in that and just sort of been overwhelmed. You were like, okay, I'm going to push, I'm going to keep swimming. I'm going to keep, going. I'm going to push beyond this. And you crafted this plan. You identified the right people. You put them in place. Did you just trust them inherently, or did you have to learn to trust them? Did you how did that process work? Are they all like you? I mean, what do you do to build a team that can take that load and make you feel comfortable growing that rapidly?
oh my gosh, my team is 90% of my team is the opposite of me, which I think is actually a beautiful thing. So I've been able to talk about this a lot recently, but the DISC profile is as kind of a bad rep sometimes as it gets for being, this long and lengthy thing that you have to take. It is so valuable if you really study what all 4 of those letters actually mean. And I did some soul searching and discovered, and obviously I have a business coach too that's helped me as we navigate this, but understanding that I'm a very high DI, and that just means that I'm a GSD mode type person. And if you're not familiar with that phrase, I would just Google it because I don't want to say it, but it's a
get stuff done. I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
get stuff done, but you know exactly what it's supposed to say, but yeah, that's me. And for me, that became really challenging, right? Because if you look at a to-do list, or if you have a plan of what you want to get done, and if you are that personality, there shouldn't be any excuses as to why it can't get done instantaneously, right? And it's almost like my personality is the type where I'd rather get asked for permission afterwards versus ask for permission up front. Meaning like I'm going to kind of go ahead and go do it and then be like, oh, sorry, I did that. And that's how I've been my whole life, right? But when you are trying to build an organization that's really sturdy, what was really important for me was understanding what my complement was. So I did a lot of research on who that person needed to be. If you've ever read Rocket Fuel, it's a really good book for being able to build your COO, or the kind of the counterpart to the visionary in your company. And God willing, I was connected with a very good longtime friend, whose wife was kind of accidentally plopped into my life again. And she's now the CEO of my organization, or COO of my organization. And she is truly the perfect other half of me. And then as the team grew underneath that, I knew what Tiffany's strengths were. I knew what my strengths were. And we have kind of a combination of all of us. We have some other high DIs, but most of our team is either ISs or SCs for sure. I feel
Yeah.
like there's only room for one really high DI in a organization.
That's good. And it's good that you can recognize that. I think a lot of people gravitate towards people that are like them because it just feels comfortable and natural.
Mhm.
And being able to be not only really understand yourself and your own quirks and tendencies, but then be able to step back from that and say, I'm going to be better as an organization if I find people that can supplement. That's sort of how we came to work with you, was that I was looking at, we're really good at doing all these things and delivering on our promises, but we aren't necessarily doing anything to put out there an idea of who we are as an organization. Like, we are these people that people connect with and they like us once they get to know us, but we weren't putting any sort of exclamation mark on, like, this is who we are as an organization because of the people, right? And so
Mhm.
I thought it was really interesting when we were talking before, you were talking about how um, there's the idea of an influencer in social media, but we really should be thinking about what's the impact. And that's what we were looking for, was we wanted to have the impact in terms of, I want people to know, who we are relationally. Like, real estate's a relationship business, right? Like, you want to build a relationship with somebody, and I want them to understand our identity, like who we are as like a culture or an organization, and it's our people. And we didn't have that anywhere that felt right. And so we turned to you, and, again, here we are coming up on a year. And I feel like when we have conversations with people now, they already feel like they know us a little bit and they feel more comfortable. There's a trust level there. How
Yeah.
does that happen? Like, social media is a little messy. So, like, what are you doing that's different?
Yeah, so the difference, and this is a really important question within my organization. As a team, we all know how to answer the question of what makes us different because it gets asked so much, no matter what side of the table you're on. And especially as you mentioned earlier, like the social media space being pretty saturated, it can get a really bad reputation in a lot of people's minds. And so it's been really important for us to define what our difference is. And truly, what we are and who we are is we focus on sales psychology and human psychology and where they meet, right? So what is the intersection between those two things? And if we can really identify that and tap into the brain of our client's ideal client, and teach them how to prospect at a really scalable level in a relationship aspect, through their DMs and through the way that they're engaging, they are going to generate business that actually comes to them. And by the time you end up on the phone with that person, the idea is that it's not a sales call. It doesn't feel hard. It feels like you're just reconnecting with someone you've chatted with. So to answer your question, like, how does that happen? Right. I think the definition of influence, I think, is the most important thing to understand. And I think you and I are going to go on another tangent about this because I think it's so important. But the word influencer is a big problem in the social media space. And the word influencer as a whole makes people feel like it's this flashy, I'm selling something and my hair is always done. Here's my Amazon link, here's my discount code, like here's all these things that create influence. And we assume that the more followers we have or the bigger presence we have, the more influence this individual might have. But what I think has gotten really askew over the last few years is that the word influence, by definition, doesn't mean any of that. It actually means, do we have the capacity to create an effect or
Yeah.
to change the behavior of someone? And so that's what we do, right? And that's what we really saw with you, Lauren, saw with our opportunity to support JPAR is you guys had an influence. You guys just didn't have a digital footprint to match it. And now you do.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I like the idea of, you know, when I hear influencer as it relates to social media, I think of somebody that's like aspirational, or like you're like in awe of them and you're sort of like, oh, I don't, they're maybe even intimidating, but like I'll click it and I'll follow it because it's like entertainment. But
Mm.
true influence is relatable, right? It is about like, oh, that's somebody that I would like to take from this online experience into an in person experience. And to me, that's like the best sort of interaction is when you create a relationship through some sort of social or online, and then it moves into a real world, real person, maybe in person. And I think we're all craving a little bit more of that, right? So it's a little, we're getting beyond the like, I want to follow 5,000 people. It is, I want to hear from, interact with, and engage with people that create a sense of community. Um, and that all wraps together for me, and like what the other part of what I really am get inspired by with you, which is your drive for community in both your
Mhm.
team that you run as well as the relationships that you create online. And that came from somewhere else. Where did you first develop your sort of concept of accountability and community that is feeding into everything that you're doing now in your business?
Yeah, so it's real deep rooted, and I appreciate the question because it's not something I feel like I get to talk about a lot, but people all often ask, how have you gotten to where you've gotten to, Michelle? And it's taken me 33 years to be able to answer that question really efficiently. But how did I get to where I've gotten? I've been an athlete my entire life. I started swimming competitively at the age of 4, swam all through college. For those of you guys who are familiar with the East Coast, I swam for Rutgers. So big school on the East Coast. Most people in Southern California are like, "You're going where?" So it was a really fun world experience for me. I went as far away as I could from home to embark on college swimming. But after that, I got really involved in the CrossFit space. And the story behind that, which I feel like is really, it literally gives me the goosebumps every time I talk about it. But my father was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma the day that I decided to start CrossFit. And why that happened for me is a very special story. So I had been an athlete literally basically since I could walk. And when I graduated from college, I had gotten into a relationship with a gentleman who was a professional billiards player. So we were in bars a lot and we were traveling a lot. We were in Vegas a lot. We were doing a lot of things that didn't equate to fitness, meaning lots of beer and lots of bar food. And I was in Michigan at the time, so I had been gone from home for just over 8 years at the time, which is a long time to be gone from your family and being part of what's going on in your day to day like world that you're so familiar with. And I remember my dad calling me the day that I ended up starting CrossFit. Had just gotten home from work. I was getting ready to go to the gym, and at the time I was just going to like a Globo gym, like a Planet Fitness type. And my dad was like, "Michelle, honey, are you sitting down?" And I was like, "No, Dad, I'm not. I'm getting ready to go to the gym. I just got home from work. Like, what's going on?" And he's like, "I need you to go sit down." And I went and I sat down. And of course, I was kind of irritated, right? And I'm like, "Come on, Dad, spit it out." And he was like, "Honey, I have stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I have about 6 months to live." And I don't think I took a breath for probably 10 minutes.
Yeah.
The very first thing I did was get on, delta.com to try to find a flight from Michigan back to Southern California. And of course, my dad was like, "No, I don't want that." And I was like, "Dad, like I have to come home." And he goes, "No, Michelle, the only thing you have to do is you have to find a place to go find fitness. And I don't care if it's pickleball. I don't care if it's badminton. I don't care what it is, but you have to get back into the gym and you have to get back to like who my daughter is." And so that afternoon, I was obviously devastated and in not a good place. And I got in my car to go get gas to go to a girlfriend's house. And the parking lot of the gas station, there was a CrossFit gym in it. It was very small. It was on a corner lot. And I had several girlfriends from college who had swam and had gotten into CrossFit. So I knew what it was, but I had
Yeah.
never thought of trying it. I walked into the gym and I still to this day I'm friends with the owner, but I was not very nice. And I pretty much said to him, "I'm going to be your best athlete and I'm starting tomorrow." And I started the following day and have since gone on to compete for close to 7 years and took a little bit of a hiatus, but have gotten back into it now after having knocks. And why that is such an important story for me is when you're gone from your family for such a long time and you lose a huge part of you, and you think that you're going to lose your dad, right? And luckily, God willing, my dad is still here with us, 7 years in remission, which is incredible. Thank you, City of Hope in Southern California, for saving my dad's life. But the CrossFit community is incredible, right? The accountability that is built into the community. It's not even about the act of the sport itself. It's about the fact that these are people that you break bread with, right? These are people who your kids go to the same school, right? These are people who are going through the same life crap that you are. right? And they know when you're not there, and you know when you're not there because you feel like they're going to know when you're not there. Like that's just the loop of it, right? So getting into the CrossFit community for me really gave me a sense of purpose. And then being able to build my team with that same feeling, because I know what it feels like to walk into a gym and feel like people are excited to see you. And so when it came to creating an organization, I knew that there had to be this kind of freedom that's involved in CrossFit in my organization, but I also knew that there needed to be the accountability of like, hey, you're still required to show up and be here. And I know if you're not here, but at the same time, like I'm not going to, follow you around and make sure you check in with me every 4 minutes, right? It's kind
Yeah.
of this balance of those two things. And CrossFit gave me that. And I thank my dad, as hard as that is to admit, right? You're like, Dad, you were right. Darn it.
That's
Many, many,
amazing.
many
And
years ago.
it's amazing to have somebody, and of course it's a parent, right? But to have people that know you so well, that know like you're going to need to like go and jump into this thing that like helps you process and will help you like, deal with this and truly move forward. I really love that you talked about the idea of like, the accountability
Mm,
and, a culture of community and bringing that to the team that you have at Berman Media, but also relating that and translating that into the customers and clients that you work with, because you can be inspired and in awe of somebody that's in incredible physical shape online, but is that really going to make you go get your butt in the gym or like, start eating healthy? No, not really, right? It's just like, oh, this is interesting, swipe and, move on. And so it really does come down to investing in those real conversations, those real connections. We actually just had, I don't even think I told you this, but we did a nationwide Zoom event, and one of our panelists was a woman that we met in the DC metro area through our Instagram page. I just thought, like,
amazing.
I was going through looking at some of the ones, that we've been interacting with, and I just thought she was really cool and inspiring, and she ended up bringing a lot of value to our panel. So it really is about creating relationships,
Mm,
and I really appreciate that part of it.
yeah.
Um, what else have you been working on? What is it that you are excited about right now? Is there anything that you're listening to, reading that you think that we should be exploring?
Yeah, there's a book that I've been reading and it was recommended to me, and I had to look at my phone to make sure I said it right, but it's called 12 and a half by Gary V. If you're not familiar with it. I know there's people can say what they want about Gary V, but he's quite smart.
Okay.
And one of the things about 12 and a half that is really relevant right now is why people are successful is most of the time not about the short term, right? And I think that that's really, really, really important in the social
Yeah.
media world. Is it is not an instant gratification type of thing. I've been in business now for almost 9 years, and I think the last 2 or 3 years is when people really, really started to see me and really started to recognize who we are and what we do for what it is. So there were 7 years of really quiet behind the scenes, like just doing good things before anyone even was like, oh, that's who that is. Right. And that's a good thing, I think. And Gary Vee talks a lot about it in this book. And he talks about how, he could be, he could make a lot more money right now than he is, but he's not in it for that. He's in it for the long game of building organizations that are going to be able to continue long after he's passed away and his kids take them over.
Yeah.
And I think it's so relevant when we transition that and talk about why people are investing in social media or why people should, right? And I think that this relates and loops back to influence, the concept of it, and that followers don't equal influence. Because that's what Gary Vee is essentially saying in this book. He's saying the same thing, right? He's saying like you could be in business for 5 years and still not have the influence that you want. I mean, he says he's 40 years old and still
Right.
feels like he's got 100 years to go before he gets to where he wants to be. So yeah, if you haven't read it, he has 12 different things that he thinks create the formula of a really, really killer organization. And one of them is conviction, which we've basically been talking about for the last little bit. And grit is on the list, and grit I think is the most important one. It's not a short play, it's a long play.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. Is there somebody else that I should be interviewing or talking to who's been inspiring you in the broader real estate space?
Yeah, so there's a lady and she's more on the mortgage side, but this is somebody who I've become really good friends with over the last, call it 6 months or so. She's been a client of ours since January, but her name is Cindy Ertman, and she's one of the largest female mortgage coaches in the industry. So she was an originator for almost 25 years, ran a humongous organization in Manhattan Beach, still lives there to this day, and she actually quit, gave up all of that to actually feed back and support people in the mortgage industry, started her coaching business called The Defining Difference a few years ago, and has just been traveling the world trying to actually create influence in the mortgage space. And her and I, every time we get on Zoom, we just feel like daughter and mom, like, because I really believe that I'm trying to follow in her footsteps as far as what she has created, because she actually has genuine influence in the mortgage space. Anyone knows who she is. Like, if you say, "Hey, do you know who Cindy Erman is?" They're like, "Well, duh," right? And so it becomes one of those things. Like, again, we're talking about influence, and you want to talk about someone that is not an influencer but has influence. It's Cindy Erman.
I love a few summary points here that, breaking out inspirational versus relatable, the idea of influence versus impact, and that the true definition of influence is tied up in, can you have impact? Can you like somehow, drive something forward or really create something tangible out of that experience? So thank you for sharing how you developed your passion for impact. And I hope that there's some great tips in there that people can take back to their own personal lives, their own personal growth, and certainly their organization. So, Michelle, thank you again for being here, and look forward to seeing you hopefully in person long before next July.
Yes, let's plan for that. But thank you, Laura. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.